There are times when a dress captures your attention and you don't want it to. You don't want it to. It's too complicated, it's too hard, but the picture comes up and you're like, yeah, I just need to know more about that dress so I can make it and wear it. Yeah, that happened to me a couple months ago. It's from this little known musical called Wicked. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it? This dress that has cursed me already is worn by Ariana Grande, or Grande, in the upcoming production of Wicked. It has not been released yet, the movie, but photos of the dress have been released for many months now. And when I first saw it, I just knew that I had to make it. I don't know why, because I'm crazy. Once I discovered what the bodice was, I was like, this is gonna be a challenge. I wasn't even looking up pictures of it. It just randomly popped up on my Instagram and I was like, no. Yeah. Also, we should probably introduce ourselves. I'm Bella, future Bella, and she's past Bella. I have more information than her. I'm Bella of Bodice Designs, and I have replicated so many movie costumes over my last decade of sewing, and my most recent ones have been the Cinderella ball gown. That is what I'm most popular for, I guess you could say, and people have really appreciated the detail and information that I gather to create my replicas. That is why I'm creating this video. I want to share those findings with you all so you can go and just either learn about costumes, because I think costumes are just amazing, especially when they're just so filled of detail and design elements. Anyway, I could go on a really long rabbit trail about that. And if you're a seamstress yourself and are wanting to create your own Wicked look, I hope this is very helpful to you. But anyway, just want to share some credentials of I do kind of know what I'm talking about. As you watch this video, you will learn why I was very hesitant and annoyed at myself for wanting to create it, because it has so much detail. It is ridiculous. And just based on my research, this ball gown probably took hundreds of hours for the seamstresses to create, and they probably made multiple like we see with most movie costumes. I don't know if I should call it a ball gown because I don't know if she wears it to ball, but it has that style. The costume designer, Paul Tazwell, did an amazing job on these costumes, and this one in particular just struck me. As with all costumes that I replicate, the very first step is study. Studying what needs to happen and how this costume was created so that I can now, with my knowledge, be able to replicate it and replicate it well. I want to take you all along on the journey of finding and discovering the details of Glinda's amazing bubble dress in the upcoming movie. So let's get started. Something that I have found very helpful in researching and studying costumes, to first gather all the photos and to somewhat arrange them and pull them up in a way that shows all the different angle and in a cohesive, orderly way. So from back to side to front to the other side. And so you kind of can create a 3D picture of what's happening with the costume. So we're gonna start at the back. And so the back is one that we don't see a lot of photos of yet. You hardly see any in promotional videos and photos, but we do have a great up-close photo of the costume on display. Thank you to everyone who shares the photos of costumes on display. You are a lifesaver. Before we go to that one, actually, let's go to the first back photo that I found. And that was this promotional photo that is incredibly high res, so that if you zoom up nice and close, you actually can see that back shape and construction. And then also a point to note in that the skirt is attached to the bodice in the front and at the sides. So I knew that the closure of this dress would have to be at the back. When I found this photo and zoomed up on it, I realized that's probably true, because at the back, the skirt is not like built into the bodice. It could be attached, but it's not the same fabric, whereas at the front, we'll see that. So zooming up, we see some petal type shape. It's not even. This whole dress is not even, so just throw that idea of evenness out. The back has these two pretty much points. There's a larger one and then there's a smaller one, but this one almost looks like it's been folded up and then creased. Hey, it's Future Bella here, just popping in to say that just a few days after filming what I've already filmed, a new video came out featuring making of footage of Glinda's dress. It's so good and shares so many details and also confirms some things. So I'm just gonna be popping in and out, sharing some of that new insight from those clips. If we pull up this back on display photo, we do see that there is a fold right here along that bottom edge. And then there's another piece, or just, I don't know how it works, but then there's another point there that the beading works into to create a point. And now at the top, we also see some curved aspects, and these are 3D curves. These are not a beaded curve. This is actually a 3D fabric goes out, curves around, and goes back into the bodice. And we see this at the front. There's two of these curved parts that are visible. And from here, I'm guessing that curve is hiding a closure. I don't think that line is actually the closure because of how the beading is very connected. I don't think it is. I think it's just the edge of that one large point. We can kind of follow that line up, and then it's just a hard edge that the beading continues over. And so that's why we're seeing that line. So that's why I believe the closure is under these folds of the back. And then you also do see one dress clasp. So right here, you can see the clasp right there between the skirt and the bodice. Now we'll go and talk about the details of the beading later. Right now, we're just getting an idea of the construction of it all. Here we do see some details of horsehair braid, which you also see in the front. So after those little folded back point areas of the back, we now see that the skirt is connected to the bodice right around here with the beading. And so we have that hard edge, and then it kind of blends in and I believe is sewn right there to the skirt. And then we continue around to the front where the skirt is connected to the bodice, as in it's one piece or it's worked under the beading and the beading continues down over the skirt. This edge of the petal is not connected, probably from around there. So on this same track, there's this clip in the new video, and this is the side. You can see the edge back point coming away right there on that hard edge. And then right here, about center side, is where you can see that skirt edge coming around. And then you can see the skirt panel here that goes under that flap. And also just some good peeks of some layers going on under that small layer. So moving on to the sides, here we just see a continuation of the beading going into the skirt. And we also see some lines here. I believe is just made with the beading in that area, but this area I believe is the horsehair trim of the bodice that creates lines in the bodice. So that back ripple part, I believe, is continued around to the front and then curves down. And then that edge continues down into the skirt edge. And now we can get to the front. Let's first talk about that top of the bodice. So this is where I first discovered the horsehair kind of curved aspect. Is we see some really great photos of about a 1/2 inch horsehair edge, not beaded, on that top sweetheart neckline. From the photos here, we can see the lines of how that is created. We can track it from that skirt up to there, and then it curves around, which we see right here, curves around and down. And then the other edge, I'm not sure if it connects to the skirt or not, but we see it coming up from under the other one and going down. With that 3D like curve going on, we've got beading on the inside and then also on the outside. But we do get some curved beading inside that curve. We can start seeing the overall design of this dress is a lot of just circle type transitions from the skirt into the bodice and then creating circles kind of as it goes back down to the skirt. Pretty unique and interesting. Once I discovered that, up close photos and details really shed a lot of light. And then we can go around to the other side And this is the side that's pretty hard to see details. There isn't many of the on display photos of this side. Here we see harsh edge of that curve that front is creating. And so I think that just goes down and then beading is done over it. And so that's why it looks blended, but it's still a hard crease because it's a double edge of fabric that the beading is going over. I hope that made sense to everyone. Now we're gonna move on to the details, is a combination of beads, crystals, and sequins. This is a super up close photo that I found on Pinterest, and it really shows more of the beading details. And from here we can see that there are many different types of sequins, and they create a gradual pattern throughout different areas. Here we've got some swoop designs. Again, down here, same idea. Also, these sequins do have a variation of color. You see some yellow and purple and blue and orange, but I do think this is because they're iridescent and not different colors. You can see the shimmer and color change in this shot. And then for the beads, we have a lot of different shades of pink going on, and also I believe silver. We see these longer, they're called bugle beads, and they're a longer bead. That's what I believe most of the beading is made up of, either longer bugle beads or smaller bugle beads. I don't think there's any like round beads. And so we see these beads creating different shapes, just as we see with the sequins. We have some up here which start off either clear or light pink, and then they get gradual to a darker pink. And then those are just like straight lines. And then here we see, I believe these are clear or maybe iridescent, longer beads that are at a different angle to each other and almost create a herringbone pattern in that one area. Here we've got some that are again clear and then goes to darker pink, and then that darker pink creates a curlicue or swirl. A lot of variations of different types of beads. As they move into the skirt, they get farther apart, which would make sense. It's gradually going out. One thing that I discovered that I'm pretty sure I'm right on is these lines right here. They almost look like a twisted look. And when I was sourcing beads, I landed upon their silver lined bugle beads. So the actual bead is clear, but the inside where the thread goes is silver lined. And then on top of that, they're twisted. And so when they're lined up, they create this swirly pattern. And so that's what I believe these few lines are. And then for a while, I wondered if they were actually crystals or beads, but I do believe they are crystals, just based on these few down here. So we don't see any clumped together crystals. They are all in a line, creating shape and just adding dimension to the whole beading. With this up close photo, you can see some different sizes of the crystal. Now, first, when I was thinking, what color crystal is it? Is it a silver? Is it like a dark pink? You know, because the way that they reflect, they show up darker than the beads, darker than the bodice. But then in other photos, I was noticing more that they show up in all different shades. It's most likely an AB crystal. So it's an iridescent crystal that shines up in different lights. Now, this same type of crystal is used on the Cinderella dress. I was wondering if my assumption was correct, because I was like, the Cinderella ones show up so sparkly and not necessarily that dark color. But then you see Glinda's dress in motion and you see that sparkle going on in the bodice. That kind of sealed the deal for me. Okay, so in this photo, I'm actually spotting some yellow crystals. You can see a distinct line. I don't think this is due to being iridescent because it's strictly that one line that's all yellow, and then just a shimmer of yellow here and there with the other lines. But then with this photo as well, you can see some distinct color differences. So I believe that sums up my findings of the bodice. Of course, I could discover more as I actually make the thing and do more research, or more photos come out. But from this point in time, that is what I've discovered. And now we're gonna move on to the skirt, which is just, it's got so many different directions going on and swirls and back on each other type situations. This is something that I personally am just gonna play around with fabric to create the proper swirls and design of the skirt. On a topic of prototypes, that's what I believe this white skirt is that we see clips of in this new video. I think it's the pattern making process of the skirt. Now, it doesn't help a whole lot because you don't get great dimension of what edge is what. Also in photos like this, I just love looking at the background and noticing some of the details, just like the different colors, fabrics, and all the photos pinned up. Just really fun. But for the most part, we do see that bodice swooping, turning into a skirt layer, and then that swoops around to the back and creates some back and forth ruffles. Same with the one part of the bodice, it swoops and then swoops under that other outer layer. From there, we get at the front, we see some almost shell-like scallop look. Bingo! So I love that I described it as shell-like because it kind of is. So the best part of this whole making of video that came out was this clip of some of the skirts coming together. So many details in there, and we'll dive into more of it as we go along. But I also love that as Paul is describing how the dressmaker constructed the pattern for this dress, he says that he used the Fibonacci spiral, which is fascinating. As I was watching back the footage of what I was filming describing the skirt, it matches up so well to this Fibonacci, hopefully I'm saying it right, spiral. So going back to shell-like, some shells have the Fibonacci spiral in them, built in them, and that mathematical equation of it kind of an enlargement. And I love when a dress design uses math. I am not a math fanatic and I'm not like super great at it, but I've always enjoyed the structure that it has. And so when I see dress design taking that kind of mathematical approach in a creative way, it's so unique, but also so nature-like because you see that spiral in so many different things like shells and flowers and petals. It comes together really well. And for me as a dressmaker designer myself, I can take that information and it helps me create the pattern because there's now this structure almost to creating the pattern. So not saying that it's going to be straight those, but I do see some evidence of cut patterns with that spiral. So anyway, going to this clip of putting it together, we can analyze the different skirt panels and see how it overall might come together. So first of all, we see the crinoline with this lower layer attached, and we'll talk about that later. We see this first ruffle spiral being attached, and we can see the point there at the end, and then it must curve under and then out, and then it just curves all the way up as it gets smaller, and then here we got that really tight curl going on. Going to the next slide, we see a side view of what that looks like, and again, we can see that very dramatic point coming out at the end. And then now we have a footage of where I think 2 more panels have been attached. So this one here, this second one, almost seems the same shape as this first one. Maybe it seems to just kind of have the same flow. Whereas this next one here, I think is almost a flip of that same pattern because we see this swirl up here going the opposite direction. Now here up front, we can see kind of what's going on with the different swirls. And then also, I think there's another section being attached up front here. This new information of the skirt coming together, it helps tie in the different details of what we're seeing as the dress is finished. Now, I think I figured out which panels are doing what in the final product with a couple of these photos. So I believe this swirl pattern is this panel right here. The one next to it, the curls go the other way, whereas this one follows a fairly similar curl as this one. Now the top part is different, and so I think from this fold on, it goes straight over here, and then that end is folded under, possibly. And then the next panel over, this one, I believe is this one. Now you can kind of see that, again, it's a similar curl going on, but that end right there just goes right up into the bodice. So either this panel here was repositioned to not be as full there, or it's a different panel. I'm still thinking it's the same because I think with the third panel, I think that is going into the front. So if we look at this photo here, we can see this long, like wide section of panel that curls around, and then it's got some extra there. That is, well, I don't know yet. This is just so far what I'm seeing come together. That could be the one that goes into the skirt, or it's the start of this shell-like design right here. We'll just stick with that description. Think more, this panel right here is this one, and it curves into the bodice, and then it kind of goes back just a little bit and then out. So we can kind of see it here, the back side. This is that front attached to the bodice. It kind of curls back a little bit, and then it goes out and then continues under here. And then here's another view of the back, which kind of that same idea of it attaches to the bodice there, it curves around the front, and then it kind of curls back on that little shell design section, and then it continues to the back. And then I think the front, this section, is a combination of different panels. Let's pause there for a moment and take a look at one other behind the scene photos that shares a lot of information. So in this photo, we see someone, I think, using a little hot iron to either just smooth it out or to attach the crystals, so hot fix crystals. But here we see an underlayer of fabric with a sewn-on piece of organza, a bigger piece, and then at the top here, another sewn-on piece that kind of is creating a little swirl curl there. I think this is how they created that little shell design that's going on in the front. Let me back up real quick. So first of all, a detail I noticed on the skirt is the look of a section of ruffle attached to the edge of it. Just like a very subtle ruffle. It's just slightly more ruffled. It's not gathered at all at that sewn on edge. It's just the outer edge just seems to have a little bit more circumference than just a plain cut circle should have. It's like adding on a little more flair to the layers. And this photo in particular, I really saw that. You can see it here, how it changes direction from the skirt. And you pretty much see on all the ruffles a sewn edge, which I believe is this added on ruffle. Now there's some that don't show up as apparent as that, because I think some of them are just the straight cut of the skirt, and then the little ruffle is connected below it with a little more give, and other ones it's like the very visible one is connected on top. But another thing I noticed is all these ruffled edges, or all these ruffles, large ruffles, have horsehair braid sewn on underneath it. So the whole skirt, all these edges we're seeing, you can see evidence of a horsehair braid sewn on. That makes sense because that's how they're getting the definition of the swoops and the curves. Now, if we look at the inside of one of these ruffles here with this photo, we can see one edge of silk organza. I believe this dress is made of silk organza. I should have said that at the beginning. I am like 99.9% sure I know silk organza. I have worked with silk organza so much, I just know its characteristics. I totally think it's silk organza. But anyway, so we can see that one layer, and then we can see that inside layer, which I think is horsehair, and then that second edge of organza. So these are either two kind of ruffles, like large skirt panel ruffles together, or it's the main skirt piece with the horsehair with a ruffle section attached. Broken into that is this fact that there's this underlayer of fabric that doesn't look like organza and is probably a stiff type of fabric. Overall, I was wondering if there was really a stiff layer of crinoline type fabric under the organza to give more structure. And it's not all thanks to horsehair braid in the hem. And that's why this prototype photo can see like a stiff ruffle with some lines in it. I think that might be that under fabric that creates that structure. Overall, in the whole dress, we do sometimes see like a ombre type dark pink section to about a foot or so of the ruffles. And sometimes it doesn't look like it's there, sometimes it does. And so I don't know if it was an ombre piece of crinoline fabric or if it's just a foot and a half type section following the edges of the curve. But in this photo, we almost get an ombre effect with this underside of fabric. So there's that to throw in the whole mixing pot of information. And then also, I think I just discovered how these sequins lines are attached to the dress. So something I noticed all along is the fact that there's these lines of sequins throughout all the ruffles skirt pieces, but they don't seem to be at the top of the fabric. They always seem to be under the layer of organza. So with this photo, you can almost see that I think those are sequin lines sewn on that under fabric. You also don't see any sewing lines on the organza. So instead, all these sequin lines were sewn onto this under stiffer fabric, and then the organza was placed on top. So you get that line sequin effect without any sewing stitches being on the organza. I think that's fascinating, and I think it's correct. So with that photo and trying to tie in these ruffled things, I think we're looking at something that uses different sections of ruffle that's attached to another section of ruffle to create some different dynamics. Actually, I just thought of this, but what we could be seeing is this top section is that curly cued part, and then this is an added ruffle to that empty section, and then the flat piece goes under this one, so it's like under this ruffle here. It comes out and then it curls that way. And so that's that like wide section. And then with this skirt panel, it's this, it goes up here, curls, and then it curls on its inside or backside to create that one. Possibly. That might be a way for it all to work. That's just a theory. I will have to pattern this to see what's happening and just work with fabric to figure it out. And when I go to make the thing, I will be releasing a pattern for this. Yes, let's take a break real quick to talk about the sponsor for this video, and that is yours truly. I have patterns available on my website for sale. I have patterns for my Cinderella ball gown replica, from the bodice to the petticoats to the crinoline, and then all sorts of other patterns that I've created, designed, and coming soon will be Glinda's ball gown pattern. Stay tuned and stay updated for when that will be released. I am so excited to share it once I actually create it, because as I'm saying, I have not created it yet, but I know I'm gonna release it once I have. Anyway, with all that to say, be sure to check the links in my description to visit my shop if you haven't yet and see if there's any patterns that you would be interested in. Anyway, let's get back to our video. Okay, so there's that situation going on with those ruffles. And then on the other side, we've kind of got the same idea going on, and we can see this underlayer kind of curves from under that little flap, and then it curves up and then goes under. And then here we've got one that kind of looks like it creates a little loop-de-loop. And this is where I'm not sure if when those like curve onto themselves, do those skirt layers end? I think they would have to, because we don't really see them coming outside of the loop. So I think there are a lot of skirt pieces going on here that are just all different shapes and creating different loop-de-loops. In another shot, you can see a couple things. Here we can see that ruffle a little bit more, possibly where it's sewn on. Again, we see here the horsehair braid pretty clear and distinct there. Here we see like a wider, thicker part of pink. So maybe that's the stiffening crinoline type fabric. Maybe it isn't on all the curls. Maybe it's only on parts. I don't know. But the main thing I'm seeing here is the seam that's going on. We've got a seam right here, and then also some loose ends. So if we look at this photo, we actually can see a seam, and I believe the same section that we just looked at. And then also right here, we can see another seam. So based on that information, we might be able to create a better idea of how those ruffles are coming together and creating those ruffles. Now, to throw a whole wrench in this whole thing is the fact that it looks kind of different depending on how Ariana is wearing the dress or how much movement she has. Looking at this photo, we kind of lose the curly Q look of that front that all the promo photos have, which would make sense. They would try to make sure the dress is laying properly. But when she's moving in it and moving around and filming the scene, it's gonna probably shuffle out of place. And so that's what I think we're seeing here. But it's hard to know what's happening because it seems like we've lost our seams and our shorter panels of the skirt. Maybe this is a completely different dress and they did different dresses, one's for promo and one's for wearing, or just based on different scenes. It's hard to tell with movie costumes sometimes because they do that. They make multiple costumes, and so you're looking at one and then it doesn't match the details of the other and you're trying to make it all fit, but in reality it doesn't fit because they're two separate dresses, but they look the same. That's just a whole nother thing to throw in there. It could have just moved out of place, could also help decipher how those ruffles were made. If we get to the details, we see a very similar pattern as far as types of things used, but the difference is that all of these are made up pretty much in these circles or bubbles. So the whole skirt has all sorts of circles on it. I'm pretty sure it's an iridescent paint creating all the little circles, and then those are embellished with crystals and sequins. With this up close photo, I was able to see some areas where there is beading on the skirt. Here's another photo, and it's just little clumps here and there. But we also see some really large, about inch, iridescent circles, which these could be paint or it's like a very large sequin without a hole in it, but we definitely see those scattered throughout. Next up, we're going to talk about the foundation structure. As with any ball gown, you need structure and shape to, one, support the skirts and also give shape to the skirts and also the bodice. I believe this is a hoop skirt worn under the voluminous, ruffly skirt. I don't think there's a petticoat. I think the skirt itself just has so many twists and turns that it creates kind of a petticoat look. But then under this, we do see a empty space, which would be created by a hoop skirt. We do see some kind of loose falling ruffles right under the skirt pieces that also have printed bubbles on it, but it seems to be just below the skirts and is very like flimsy looking. I think this is just an added ruffle that's been embellished. I got it right! We have a hoop skirt made in a sheer kind of brownish material and then a layer or two of flimsy type fabric. Now we do see the curve that it has with the length of the flounce or frill that's been added, and we see it high at the back and then low at the front. I believe this is because of how the skirt panels are constructed. There's more maybe openings in the back that would allow that hoop skirt to be seen. Now from these photos, I would say it's an elliptical type of hoop skirt or crinoline. It seems to be fuller at the back and shallower and like flatter at the front. Very much Cinderella's ball gown, same idea. And then also we do see some interesting like shape it's got going on the front there. That might be the fact that she's just put on those skirt panels. That weight of that skirt has pushed front part of the hoop skirt out a little bit. So that's why we get that weird like shape going on. And then lastly is a corset. Corsets are fundamental to creating shape for dresses and just to support the weight of skirts. I cannot stress it enough. You want a corset or you want a built-in corset to the bodice to create that shape and also help support the skirts. So anyway, we see that this costume designer did incorporate corsets, not just in the ball gown, but also Glinda's other looks in the film. So we see this behind the scene photo of Ariana, and she is wearing one of her dresses, but it's kind of slipped off while she's eating, and underneath we see a corset. Now this is a modern style corset, so of course I don't know this, but I would guess that a similar corset or that same one was worn under the ball gown. We see that it does have a lace-up back, At the front, it does not have the cup design that I was originally thinking might have been worn under this. This one does not look like the same one. There you have it. I hope that all made sense. And I hope it also left you with a curiosity to discover details yourself. I am only one person and I only have the limited images that I've found thus far. I don't have all the information. And so if you've learned something else about it, share that in the comments. And also be kind. This video was filmed in October, and in a few months we might have completely new photos that share more information on it. But I will also add, I will be replicating this dress in the coming months. So be sure to stay tuned to that whole process. I will be sharing videos about it all. And also I will be coming out with patterns, especially for the skirt, because I think that one's gonna be a big one just to figure out patterning. So thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification button so you can keep up to date with all my making of videos. Huge thank you to my patrons, YouTube members, and Instagram subscribers. They are continual support to me and I'm just so grateful for them and grateful for you watching. And then also I will be sharing behind the scenes photos as I create this look. So if you want to see some of those before everyone else, you can find links to all that down below. As always, go out there and learn, create, and inspire.